It's great to be back here discussing these issues and seeing everybody on screen. Hope you're doing well. Still counting your Omer. Looking forward to Shavuot and doing well. So as I said, we're doing they're four disparate subjects, but they're four challenging issues on the Torah. First, we did in the first week about creation and how can we read chapter 1 of Genesis and make sense of it as modern people who know about modern science and technology. Then last week we looked at, that was creation. And then last week we looked at retaliation. And that was a very disturbing moral challenge of the story of King David after the war with the Moabites, where he lines up a third of them, two-thirds of them and kills them. We looked at the commentaries for that and about the issue of collective punishment, which are very relevant to Israel today. And this week we're looking at another thorny issue, which is being the chosen people, being the chosen ones. And even though people might say chosen doesn't mean better, just think about what it does when we educate young people and call ourselves the chosen people. And I'm going to describe the issue a bit, and then we're going to look at three different responses to the issue, and I'm going to put them in historical context. And historical context is the key, because once you understand when these were said or the context which they were said, that helps understand why it came about. And hopefully by the end of it, we'll have a more mature understanding of what being chosen means. So I'll share my handout with you and I will send it to, well, Sherelle's probably put it in the chat as well. And we'll start over here. Just the picture, by the way, if you recognize, it's from the first movie, Toy Story. Remember that really funny computer animated film Pixar a number of years ago? And there's this one little moment where Buzz Lightyear falls into, remember that machine that you kind of have a kind of claw that picks up different toys and you have to move the claw to get it? So he falls into that and these little creatures live there. And it's a wonderful little idea of, imagine a civilization that lived inside there and thought that the whole idea was to be chosen by the claw and taken to another life. And in literally 1 minute, maybe 40 seconds, they do a whole world view. But at one point, one of those little green creatures with the 3 eyes, which I call Jews, by the way, got picked up. And as he's being risen into the air, he looks up and says, "I've been chosen, I've been chosen." So anytime I do chosen people, I always think of those little green men. So that's why they're sitting there. So please God, you like them should be chosen. Okay, so here we go. Now, here's the thing. How do we educate our children? And I think what I'm saying now applies to all elementary schools, different denominations, different religious levels. But essentially, we teach them, you know, very early on, one of the morning blessings, said in the morning, right? Asher, which we say when you're called up to the Torah, Asher bacha banu mikol amim, who's chosen us from all the nations. So in that immediate statement, you're saying we have been chosen. It doesn't. Now, if it just says we've been chosen by God, that's one thing. But it says Asher bacha banu mikol ha'amim. Relative to them, we are chosen. They are not. That's purely, to an extent, hierarchical. But that's what I know. It's Torah. God goes to Torah. Hashem noten Torah. Then in the Amida, the standing prayer on festivals, we say Asher b'chatanu mikol amim, who've chosen us from all the peoples. And many times in our prayer, we talk about being chosen. Additionally, it's at the end in Deuteronomy. In Devarim, there are 4 mentions of this situation, and each time it talks about chosenness. So in source 3, right, and because God loved your ancestors, therefore, he chose their seed. Because God loved your ancestors, he chose you specially. And then number 4 as well. For you are a holy people to God. It is you God has chosen to be his as a treasured people. Mikol ha'amim, from all the others. Right? Chashak Hashem bachem in the green. God desired you. Vayivcha b'hem, and chose you. So if we teach our children this over and over again, you don't think they're going to end up with a kind of elitist view that they're more important? A kind of, I mean, every culture has an ethnocentric ideology to an extent. So in other words, Americans think America's great, or could be great again, right? Or France is an amazing country, or Russia is an, you know, or Britain, rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves. We all believe we're a bit special, right? So you could argue that's just a standard feeling. But with the Jewish people, it's something kind of beyond that. We really believe very beyond that. And if you're very extreme on this issue, you think, you know, the word for the nations of the world means the goyim. But the word goyim, as you know, has a kind of negative connotation, the goyim, right? I'm now going to tell you a joke. I doubt you'll laugh, but this is a joke that I was told about this Israeli family, ultra-Orthodox family, who for the first time leave Israel, and they visit France, and they see all these people who are not dressed like them, and the little boy says to his Abba, he says, "Daddy, who are all these people?" And his father says, "They're goyim." And then they go to Germany and they see all these people. Who are they? He goes, "They're goyim," and they go to France. They go all over Europe traveling, right? And when they come home, the mother, because it was the father went with the boy for the trip, the mother says to the boy, so what did you learn? He goes, "Well, Mummy, I feel really bad for all these goyim because they're spread out in all different countries and they're not together." Anybody smiling? No? Okay. Well, there you go. Anyway, that's a very ethnocentric joke where you kind of think you're you. It's like, just the word non-Jews, just think how narrow that is. Like, majority of the world are human beings, and we believe we are 0.001% of the population or whatever we are, and we call everybody else non-Jews. It's like ants thinking everything on the planet is a non-ant. It's kind of a bit ridiculous. But we do it in that way because we're ethnocentric. We look at our point of view as we're special. And look at source 5 and 6, similarly as well, that God chose us again and again, the same phrase over and over again. And the one that really clinches it here is source 7, 8, and 9. So source 7 and 7a. 7 is at Mount Sinai. Remember? In chapter 19, we're about to receive the Ten Commandments. And God tells Moshe to tell the people to get ready. And he says, Hashem says this to Moshe to tell the people, Va'ata, and now, Im Shema Tushma B'Koli, if you will really listen to my voice, or Shema Timet Briti, and listen to my covenant, V'tem mi segula, you will be to me as my treasure. Mikol amim, from all the nations. Kili kol haaretz, because all the earth is mine. Now look at what Rashi says, the standard commentary in all the Chumashim, right? What does it mean? Be holy, kili kol haaretz, right? V'lo tamru atem levadchem sheli, right? Don't say that you alone, right, are mine. I don't have any others. In other words, that I had no choice. Right? Don't say that only you are mine and I don't have anybody else. Kili kol haaretz. God says all the nations of the world are mine. Right? But vehem be'einai or lefanai lichlum. But they, in my eyes and before me, are nothing. Nothing. Klum. That's not nice. That's a very British way of saying it. It's very rude to say that. Right? That they're nothing. So it's a problem. You can easily see how this view can become very problematic. And I think there are many Jews, not just from one denomination. I think there are a lot more Jews who are racist than we like to admit. That we think we're kind of better, special in some fundamental spiritual way, right? Chosen by God. And that can be a problematic point of view. To have that, to look in the way. Also, from a kind of purely rational point of view, why would a universal God of the world, creator, have a special relationship with such a small percentage? The God of all the earth will have a relationship with only some people on earth. So I could imagine a Jew saying, "I don't believe in chosen people. It makes no sense. How could that be?" And that's the challenge that we're setting up here about it. How does it work? Why are we saying this? So I'm going to give 3 answers, right? Three responses. The first one is it's not just about God choosing us. It's about us choosing God. That's A. We'll look at that. Then we're going to look at a very important historical stage in the Middle Ages, which is about the choicest people and how that came about and how some racist strands were brought into our tradition. And then finally, about being chosen to serve. And I'll show you a different strand of ideas which understood chosenness in a very particular way, which is important to share, and that's why I'm doing it. Okay, so that's the plan for today for the class. Feel free to make comments. Let me just check in the chat as you go, but I'll take them at the end as well. Okay, I've got a direct message. Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. And now let's move forward. Okay. So here we go. Choosing God. How odd of God to choose the Jews. Not so odd The Jews chose God. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you look at the sources, right, the way the rabbis look at it, in some ways, the reason why God chose us is because we somehow were special and had chosen to believe in God already in some way. What does that mean? So let's look at this midrash. It's quite a late one. Yalkut Shimon is a late midrash, but it's based on a verse in Numbers, Ki merosh tzurim erenu. From the top of the rocks, I do see them. Right? From the top of the rocks. God, it's a vision that Bilam has when God is prophesying from God. So the midrash says, this may be compared to a king who was planning a building. This is my translation. Who was planning a building project. Shirel, you can check the Hebrew if you think it's a good translation. But while digging to lay firm foundations, he found only swamps and mire. At last, he hit a solid rock. So he said, here I can build. Okay. When you next go to Israel, my friends, they are just finishing a new museum at the Kotel. I got to visit it because I sat next to the guy Yom Kippur last year who was doing the digging. During COVID, when there was no one at the plaza, so you know the plaza there's a valley, right? The Temple Mount is on a mountain and the old city is on a mountain, right? And in the middle is a valley. And the plaza, which you go to visit the Kotel, covers that valley. And it's always full of people. But during COVID, it was empty. And it's hollow, not hollow underneath, it's full of stuff underneath. So while no one was there, they drilled 8 massive boreholes down from the piazza, put concrete in them so they could hold it up. And then for the last 2 years, they've been digging under the piazza and finding the most amazing things. And I got taken on a private tour there last year. And I got to go to the Kotel itself. Why am I telling you? Because you can see where the Kotel goes all the way down into the very foundations of the earth. You see how far, it's like 20 meters down. It's amazing how they built the thing. So this king is going down, similarly, to try and find a solid rock, because he can't build his palace on mud. It'll just move and collapse. So he says, here I can build. Similarly, when God was about to create the world, he foresaw the sinful generation of Enosh and the generation of the flood and all the terrible things they'll do, and said, how shall I create the world when I see wicked people arise to provoke me? There's going to be Eretz full of Hamas, what will happen during the flood. But then it says, but when God saw that Abraham one day would rise, and he said, behold, I found the solid rock on which to build and base the world. Thus Abraham is called a rock, as it says, look to the rock you were hewn from, look to Abraham. Hibitu el tzur chutzavtem, hibitu el Abraham avichem. Right? And Israel are now called rocks. So because Abraham found God himself, and God saw one day there'll be a person who'll find God, God said, I can build the world. So God chooses to build the world because he can see in the future there'll be a person that will choose God and monotheism and reject idolatry. So who's choosing who? That's source 8 on this, first one of choosing God. The second one also adds to this. Okay, this is based on a verse in Deuteronomy, the best mutual verse in the Torah, which talks about we call to God, so God calls to us. The Hebrew is very interesting. You should look it up. Et Hashem he'emata hayom. He'emata comes from the word to say, but it's kind of it's a declaration or a vouching something, right? You have declared, of God you have declared today, right? And God has declared you today. It's a kind of mutuality between the two relationships. So the Talmud says, the Holy One, blessed be God, said to Israel, you have made me the sole object of your appreciation in the world. I shall make you the sole object of my love in the world. You've made me the sole object of your love, as it says, Shema Yisrael, and I'll make you the only one as Umikam Yisrael, Goy Echad Ba'aretz, one nation on earth. But again, in that idea, we choose and love God, and so God chooses and loves us. Lovely idea from Margot. Abraham is our instead of patriarch, he's our patriarch. Very cute, Margot. Thank you. Very good. Okay. But yes, we are rocks, by the way. We are rocks. So yeah, and number 10 as well, similarly. Now, yeah, so what's going on here? So before I get to 10, you know, there's a whole bunch of sources I didn't bring here because there's a lot of them. I quote quite a few of them in my book about the love story of God saving the Jewish people. You know, the one at Mount Sinai, where God was going to offer the Torah to all different peoples and each one asked something else, but the Jews just said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we'll just do it. So these texts about choosing God are a kind of love story, right? In other words, when you read them, it's, you know, if you read it as a rational statement of the Jews are chosen by God, that feels like a specialness. But when you read it in context, it's about us choosing God and God choosing us. And it sounds like a love story. And the reason why that's interesting is in a love story, you always feel you're special. Well, I don't know if you do this when you go to a wedding now, as older people, and we see these people in their 20s get up and talk about young love, and you think, oh, isn't it so cute? And they kind of feel they're the first people to be in love. And if you're cynical, you go, oh, they'll learn as they get older. But if you're not, and you can still appreciate that, then you appreciate that that the feeling of love is there's no one like you, that you're the best person in the world. Even though objectively it's not true, the feeling of love is that. So this statement of God chose us is a love story, and that's how we can think about it. There's a great Prefab Sprout song called "All the World Loves Lovers." All the world loves people in love. It's a very cute little song, and that's, I think, what the story is here. And when it comes to lovers, you're not sure who chooses who, right? There's even a quote here. I've got it. I didn't put it in the handout, but I've got it over here. Yes, it says. Yes, yes. This is a source from Sifrei Deuteronomy. It's on page 190 of my book, and the quote says, "We do not know," say the rabbis, "if God chose Israel or if Israel chose God." Right? Because why? Because when it's a matter of love, a love is a dance. There was a relationship between God and the Jewish people, and it's a kind of loving relationship. And all these sources in Deuteronomy about chosenness are not about objective hierarchy, but about an emotional expression. So we are the choosing people as much as we are the chosen people. Because at Mount Sinai, we said we'd do it. We jumped into bed with God at Mount Sinai and took the risk. That's the point about this point of view here. It was never meant to be seen as a hierarchy. It's a love expression. So that's one reading based on the rabbis that I've identified as this approach. Just checking the chat over here. A lovely example from Ellen. Anila dodi v'dodi. Absolutely right. A line from the Psalms. I'm for my beloved and my beloved is mine. Often said at weddings. And absolutely right. And Jason thinks that Jewish people are rock stars. Thank you, Jason, for that. Thank you. Much appreciated. Okay. Old rocker like you. Very good. Okay. And let's move on. So that's stage A, right? That is what I'm saying is the choosing, the choosing people who choose God. And therefore, it shouldn't be seen as an objective statement of hierarchy, but as an emotional expression of we feel close and God has chosen us. Now, by the way, it doesn't preclude God choosing other people for other things, right? There could be other worlds where God has other relationships. We just know about ours, right? There could be other things we just don't know about those. And we've still got the question, by the way, is if you're not born Jewish, is that fair? And we'll come to that at the end as well. Like if we believed, like Christianity and Islam, that we should proselytize and convert everyone to us, then everyone would have the privilege of being chosen, right? Because you could all convert. But if as Jews we think we're chosen and we don't encourage conversion or even expect it, is that fair to the world? We've got this special relationship and say, and you can't join the club. Right? Or why would you want to join the club? And we don't want everybody to join the club. So how does that work? So we'll come back to that. But anyway, step one is the choosing people. That's one explanation. You might find that apologetic, but what I've tried to do is show a strand in the sources that expresses that emotion and that feeling. That's number one. Number two is the most uncomfortable part we're going to look at. This is a particular strand of thought that occurred in the medieval period. It's first strongly identified in the 12th century by Yehuda Halevi. Okay? Now, what does he say? Now, he writes famously this book called the Kuzari. And the Kuzari was a defense of Judaism. But there's a number of very disturbing statements that he makes in the book. And let's look at those now. So just getting some context here. Sorry about that. Yes, here we go. So I remember that his book was actually written because he was trying to explain to Jews what our beliefs were, and he did it as a story to a non-Jewish king. But look what he says. God chose Israel as his people from all the nations and allowed his influence to rest upon all of them. Okay, that's chosen. And then he says, you know, the primal elements gradually evolved. Metals, then plants, then animals, humans, and then the treasure of humankind. The whole progression took place for the sake of the treasure. You know what the treasure is? You and me. So you might say there's mineral, one level, then vegetable, then animal, then human, and then Jew, right? So he's not discussing this even on a conceptual level. This is biological for him, right? Interesting. Next, the sons of Jacob are distinguished from other people by divine qualities, which made them, so to speak, an angelic caste. We're like angels. Might seem very far from the truth today, but that's what he's saying. Any non-Jew who joins us unconditionally shares our good fortune, right? If you convert, you share our good fortune, without, however, being equal. So you can convert, but you're never fully a Jew, because we are the treasure of humankind. It's quite shocking. You can convert, and you're kind of with us, but you're not really. Those who become Jews do not take equal rank with born Israelites who are specially privileged to attain prophecy, while the former can only achieve something by learning from them and can only become pious and learned, but never prophets. So not only does he think on a kind of physical level that Jews are better or on a higher level of existence than non-Jews, but even the conversion process doesn't really change things. That's quite radical. Why would he have written that? That's not in the Talmud. It really isn't. Right? Yehuda Levi, why is he writing this in the 12th century? And those ideas get picked up in the Zohar. Right? I don't know if you know your... Oh, sorry. And if you get the standard translation of the Yehuda Levi's HaKuzari, it's by... this is the one. It's published by Shochem Books. And in the introduction by Hartwig Hirschenfeld, he says the following. His book, meaning Yehuda Levi's, is an elaborate theory of an innate superhuman distinctiveness in hearing, that means inside, in the Jewish people, and amounting to a special soul form. The climax towards which everything converges is the notion of election and of the unique and supernatural character of the Jewish people and its history. Right? Heavy stuff. Now it makes me uncomfortable. The Kuzari is brilliant in many other areas. I love reading it, but on this, it really makes me feel queasy. Oh, sorry. Do Americans feel queasy? Is that a word? I don't know. But if not, then write in the chat an alternative to queasy. Uncomfortable. Discombobulated. Okay. So now the Zohar, which even though is argued to have been written much earlier, was only published in the 13th century by Moshe de Leon, and it's pretty much a 13th century work. It could have been building on ideas previously, but it's a 13th century work. And we're going to do some Zohar now, so hold on to your hats. It's unusual, but you'll see the ideas here as well. He says, at the hour of wedded union on earth, God said, and that's talking about marriage. God sends a certain, when a couple sleep together and cause a baby, a certain form with the figure of a human being which hovers above the union. And if a person's hour capable of such a thing, it would see a form over their head. So when people are making love and they're beginning the process of fertilization of the egg, then at a kind of spiritual level, the image of what the baby will be hovers above the head. And if you are on a high spiritual level, you could see it. The child is created in that form, but before that form stands over a person's head, the child is not created. That form being prepared for it before issues in the world, and God created it in his image. In that form it grows up, in that form it goes about. Okay, fine. Then he says, this form is from on high. When the spirits go forth from their places, each one stands before the Holy King, its adornments, with the countenance it's to wear in the world, and that's its form. So, you know, the Zohar is quite Kabbalistic. It's got these spiritual ideas that there's a conceptual you that floats above your parents that one day you'll become. But now look what the Zohar says. In the case of Israel, Jewish people, he means, who are holy, this tselem, this image, this form is holy and from a holy place. But for the heathens, okay, non-Jews, it comes from the evil species, from the side of uncleanliness. Therefore, a person should not mix their form with that of a heathen, because the one is holy and the other is unclean. Okay? So Jews being with non-Jews is a metaphysical crash, right? It's not appropriate. This explains why the dead body of an Israelite defiles, while the dead body of a heathen does not defile. By the way, in Jewish law, this is true. A Kohen, in theory, if a Kohen doesn't go to a graveyard, it shouldn't be a near dead body. It's really near a Jewish dead body. Now, you wouldn't go to any graveyard because there might be Jewish bodies there. But in principle, a Kohen is not allowed to be will lose their purity by being near a Jewish dead body, but not other ones. And this is the reason why. For when an Israelite dies, all the sanctifications of their master depart from them, and that holy form and spirit leave their body, and it's left unclean. So they become tamei. Therefore, a Kohen, if he went near them, would become tamei. But the contrary is the case with the non-Jew. For their form and spirit were unclean in them in the first place. They never were clean. When they were alive, they weren't clean. So when they die, nothing changes. Their body, though unclean, doesn't propagate uncleanness because they always were. And therefore, a Kohen doesn't become unclean. Uncomfortable? Me too. Quite shocking what the Zohar is saying, right? That we are on this higher level than them. And it's a kind of metaphysical impossibility for a Jew really to be with a non-Jew or the highest species, right? Now, am I going to justify what the Zohar said? No, though I love the Zohar in other areas. I can't justify it, but I can explain it, and I really can explain it. So let me read you a bit, because I worked really hard on the words for this, so I think I wrote it better than I could say it myself. So I'll read it out to you. Here we go. These ideas of the Kuzari and the Zohar, which imply a kind of racial superiority, were picked up in some later traditional writings as well. So you'll notice, by the way, if you're into Chabad Hasidut, the Tanya, the main book of Chabad Hasidut, chapter 1 and a bit of chapter 2, brings these ideas that Jews are on a higher spiritual level than anybody else. After that, the Tanya gets really good. But that first chapter is really uncomfortable. And the Hasidic idea comes directly from here. So I've given you 3 major books. The Kuzari, the Zohar, and the Tanya all do this. How come? So here we go. How then to explain this disturbing strand of Jewish thought? Right? Once again, appreciating historical context is vital. Yehuda Halevi was a teenager when the first crusade erupted in 1096. In fact, his whole life was overshadowed by the relentlessly military conflicts between Christian and Muslim armies as they fought to control Spain and the Holy Land. And in one poem, the Kuzari wrote, whenever they fight their fight, it is we who fall. The enemies battle like wild beasts. Just imagine what it was like for a teenager Halevi. Not only are there people battling outside, they're doing it in the name of God. These weird Christians who argue with the big cross on them, they're doing it in the name of God. And these Muslims who both quote the Bible are killing each other and Jews in the name of God. And he's like, they're mad. They're animals. We're not like them. So the belief of Jews being higher, I think, came from seeing other religions as being lower, as being particularly immoral. And that's how he saw them as different. Let me quote to you from, you might have read, it's a wonderful book, by the way. I like quoting things now because I know Shirel will add it to the list, so it's really good. There's a great book by Peter Frankopan called The Silk Roads, A New History of the World. So instead of putting Europe at the center, it puts the more to the east in the center. It's an amazing history of the world. It's a really great read. The Silk Roads. And he actually wrote a sequel called The New Silk Roads about the issue of the Belt and Road that China's doing and the whole changing trade routes that are going on in the world today. But the Silk Roads, if you like history, you've got to read it. Here's a quote from the Silk Roads. Jews of Europe witnessed shocking violence at the hands of the supposedly noble crusaders. Right? Frankopan's not Jewish, but look what he says. He says, in the Rhineland, women, children, and the elderly had been butchered in a sudden escalation of anti-Semitism. Jews were paying the price for the refocusing of Western Europe's manpower and attention towards the East. The bloodlust was directly linked to the idea that Jews were responsible for Jesus' crucifixion and that the land of Israel should be held by the Christians of Europe. Now, if you lived through those persecutions, and to this day, on Tisha B'Av, we talk about the terrible massacres that happened during the Crusades to the Jewish people. We have kinot about it. If you lived through that and saw that violence and that hate in the name of God, and some of you maybe looked up the Bob Dylan song from last week, in the name of God, right? Then what would you think of non-Jews? What would you think of them? Okay? Look at the way many Jews get upset when people around the world say terrible things about Israel. Okay, in terms of calling Israel, I'm talking very early on, and you know there were anti-Semitic comments coming out straight after October the 7th, even before Israel defended, right? And it's caused many Jews to go, everybody hates us, and they're all mad, right? And it's not true. There's all different kinds of people in the world, but people imagine these things. So again, I'm not justifying Yehuda Halevi or Moshe de Leon, author of the publisher of the Zohar, or even of the Tanya, right, from the previous the Alter Rebbe, I think it is, a previous Chabad Rebbe. What I'm saying is, I can understand how they might have thought in this way in the time they lived. And I'm not so arrogant as to say to myself, I would have been better to think than like that. That's the point there. Having said that, not everyone in the Middle Ages thought like that. This was one extreme strand of ethnocentrism that grew as a result of the violence and the hatred in Europe. But not everyone fell into this, although I understand how they did. Again, relevance for today, surprisingly. And there's another strand I want to show you. And that strand is the third approach here, right? Chosen to serve. I'm going to go back to the sources we did and now show you alternative commentaries from the Middle Ages and moving into the modern period who read it very differently. Do you remember we had that verse from Exodus that said, we had this, Vitem li sugula, you'll be treasured to me because all the earth is mine. And Rashi said, everybody else is klum, everything else is nothing, right? Vitem li mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh. Well, it also says, you will be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the things you should say. So we've had one interpretation from Rashi. Now we've got a different interpretation. And now we're going to look at the son of the Rambam. It was only published later on. It's Ben Avraham ben HaRambam. He wrote his own commentary on the Torah. And when it says that God called us a kingdom of priests, a mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, which again could be read in a kind of hierarchical, elitist way. Look how he translates. Let's look how he explains it. He says, the key to the phrase kingdom is that it does not just say, and you'll be to me as priests, right? It says you'll be a kingdom of priests. What does that mean? The sages understood this to mean you shall become distinguished leaders like kings. So when it says a kingdom of priests, it means king is melech is a leader, right? The head is the melech of the body, right? It means the leaders as priests, distinguished leaders. And it seems to me this means you shall become for me kings of the world and guide them. Melachim al olam umanhigim lahem. Your job is to guide them. You'll be kingly because of what I've taught you. I'll raise you up. And then your job is to guide everybody else to do that as well. Not that you're just better and that's it. You might have been brought up high, but your job is to raise everybody else, to guide them. Look what the Sforno says. Again, Italian now. This is in a more modern context, in the 16th century. You'll be a kingdom of priests, lahavin, to understand ul horot, and to teach l'chol hamin onashay, to the whole human race. Likro kulam b'shem Hashem, that they should all come to call in the name of God and serve Him. You see what I'm saying? So yes, you are chosen, but not because you're better, because you've got a job to do. You seen Fiddler on the Roof? When Tevye says, I know we're the chosen people, but couldn't you choose somebody else for a change? Right? Because it's a big job. So now let's go over to the one who explains it brilliantly, is of Samson Raphael Hirsch. Right? Remember the phrases we're analyzing are segula, right, meaning treasured, and then a kingdom of priests. So look what he says. He says, segula means we must become a treasured possession, which nobody else has any rights to, with no relationship to anybody else. So the use of this word, he says, God's possession, and be focused. Okay, so that's about, we should see the purpose of being Jewish as not just another nation on earth doing things. We have a role to do. And what's the job? And he said, remember, for all the earth is mine. Remember Rashi said, all the earth is mine, so everybody else has nothing. Look what Hirsch says now. But this relationship you are to bear towards me is really nothing exceptional. It is the normal condition which the world should bear towards me. The whole of humanity, every nation in the world, is really destined to belong to me and will ultimately be educated by me up to me. You see what he's saying? He's saying the idea is that everyone recognizes God. You were given an opportunity to be close to God. But the aim is that everybody does. Look what he says. A kingdom of priests means that each and every individual of you is to become a Cohen. Now, how can we all be Kohanim? A Kohen means a priest who then is more religiously focused and helps other people, right? Like a rabbi. But if you're all priests, who are you priests to, right? A Kohen is a priest to the Jewish people, but if the Jewish people are a kingdom of priests, who are they priests to? Ergo, the rest of the world. A priest, inasmuch as they are to follow all their actions, to be regulated by me, to take the yoke of heaven faithfully on their shoulders, and become a true Kohen, who by their word and example spread the knowledge of God and loyalty to God throughout the world. That's the idea. That's the purpose. Right? So, you know what it's like? Do you remember when the first iPhones came out? And there was always someone amongst your crowd who was the first to get it and show their friends. Right? And people call those early adopters, early adopters of new cars or whatever the new fad is. There's always someone who gets it first, right? The Jews were the early adopters of monotheism. For whatever reason, this relationship with God, we realized this issue. And our responsibility is to share it with the world. Are you better than someone because you bought an iPhone a year before they did? Right? I don't want to extend the idea too long because, they've got upgraded models. It gets all complicated. But the point I'm making on a simple level, right? It says God came down with 2 tablets. They were clearly iPads. I'm just trying to keep you smiling here. Okay. But the idea is that we were early adopters of belief. And our job is to raise everyone to get to that as well. So to think you're better, you've got to be an idiot. Literally. You're better. Your job is to help them get to this place. You're not special because of an innate biological thing inside you, right? You have a mission to share this so that you're not special, so that everyone appreciates this. And if you keep it to yourself and you think you're better, not only are you wrong, it's the reverse of the purpose of being chosen. See that? And these ideas came from rabbis who lived during and after the Crusades like others. They just took a different path. They just took a different path and understood it. And you know what? In most societies, you have some people who can, it's a quote from my teacher, Rav Sachs. He said, Rafi, it's not about people being right and wrong. It's about small and large. Some people are small and some people can see something larger. And that's the challenge of the Jewish people, to think beyond just their own woes and worry for the world. Okay, we're just getting some things. Yes, okay, I can see your problems. Yes. It's a lovely comment from Arnold here. I'm just reading as I go because it's interesting. When the world hates you, you have 2 choices. Agree that you are really inferior or react by stating your superiority. People who hate won't be satisfied by the original concept for chosenness. It's a good point, Arnold. But there's always a third approach, which is I understand why people might hate me. And I'm not going to fall into the need to react to that. It's a very difficult thing to do, but you can. You can always choose how you react. And some lovely pictures. Thank you, Jason. Weren't Zoroastrians the first monotheists? To argue that Zoroastrianism is monotheistic and to know how old it is, Rita, will be a huge task. So maybe, okay? Maybe. You could go for the Akhenaten of the pharaohs to argue who's monotheist as well, but I'm not so sure. But monotheism was us, I would argue, but it's arguable. So it doesn't have, we don't have to do the first. It's fine. Okay, so going back to Hirsch, what I'm saying from this approach, therefore, is that the chosenness is only that we can help everybody else get close to God. And therefore to think that we're better is completely wrong. It's mistaken. It's just missing the point completely. right? The only reason you have something special is in order to share it. So if you don't share it, you don't deserve it. And by the way, that's one argument of why God punishes the Jewish people. They've been given a task, and if you don't do it, you get punished. Why do you get punished? Because the task itself gives you something special. And by definition of not doing the task, you're abusing something in the world, and that's deserving of punishment. No wonder Tevye said, just choose someone else for a change. I don't want this anymore. I can understand. Now, one of my favorite texts of all time, and I don't say this that often, this is the Rambam. Now, famously, Maimonides, he wrote a 14-volume book called the Mishnah Torah, and there's a whole bunch of sections on laws. And at the end of every section, he doesn't just make a law, he talks about something slightly more philosophical. And this is the end of the laws of Shemitah and Yovel, which is kind of relevant because this week's Sedra is about Shemitah. But anyway, this is what he said. Now, this was so controversial that in versions of the Rambam, translation of the Hebrew, this got taken out or adjusted because a lot of Jews found it shocking in the 14th to 15th century when they printed this, that he wrote this. They couldn't believe it, so they changed it. I'll show you how they changed it in a minute. He says the following. He's talking about the tribe of Levi, and there was a note in the chat that the tribe of Levi is kind of special in some ways, you know, the Kohanim from others as well. And he compares the tribe of Levi to all of us. And he says the following. Shehuvdal, the tribe of Levi was set apart to serve God and to impart God's forthright ways and just laws to the masses. As it says, Yoru mishpatecha liYaakov v'tora'techa liYisrael. They will teach your laws to Jacob and your instructions to Israel. Thus the Levites have been set apart from the norms of the world. They do not wage war like the rest of Israel. They do not inherit land, nor do they compete personally through physical means. Okay? That wasn't their role, that tribe. And now look what he says. V'lo shevet Levi bilvad. And that's not just Levi. Ela kol ish ve'ish mi ba'alei ha'olam. Right? They cut that bit. Right? This means not just Levi, but anyone in the world across the globe. This means any human being on the planet, Jew, non-Jew. They got cut to just go Ela kol ish ashen idbar, and they change it that you felt like he's talking about Jews, but he clearly wasn't. He says, and not only the tribe of Levi, but in fact anyone at all from across the globe who is moved to dedicate themselves, whose mind comprehends the need to stand apart before God, to serve and to work to know God and walk straight as God made them, to transcend the many thoughts in which others lose themselves, such a person becomes consecrated, Kodesh Kodoshim, Holy of Holies, V'yu Hashem Chelko, and God is his portion, V'nachalato, and his inheritance, L'olmi Olamim, forever and ever. And they'll merit what this world has to offer, just like the priests and Levites. I love that text. You know why? Because it's saying you don't need to convert to be part of the mission of showing monotheism and living morally in the world today. Don't need to be Jewish. He says anyone who gets it, anyone who believes and comprehends you must stand apart and be a moral voice in public, right, is just like a Cohen, and is therefore just like Mamlechet Kohanim, and is therefore just the king of the priests, and is just part of the is also Sugula, is chosen by God. It's an amazing universalistic statement to be made by a Jew in the 12th century in Spain, who also knew about violence and Muslims attacking and the beginning of the Crusades. And yet Maimonides did not take the path of Judah Halevi. He didn't. He could still see the possibility of a universal belief in humankind. And guess what? Right? Israel and the Jewish world today is full of Halevis and Maimonides. Some of us who think everybody else has gone mad and we're special, and others who are crying inside, of course, for what's happening, but believe that all of us have the ability to get to this level, if only we can share those ideas and be an example of them. It's an amazing thing when you think about it, that both these trends happened in the medieval period when horrible things were happening to us. And therefore, if they can think like this, even in that context, then maybe we can too. And finally, which nails it really clearly, is this wonderful midrash from Tana Dever Eliyahu. So it's quite late, early medieval maybe, okay? And it's a quote about a woman, shock horror, Devorah, the book of Judges, right? One of the most successful leaders. She sat under a tree and judged, Big difficulty for the rabbis because women can't be judges. So how could she be? She was special. It says, Devorah Isha Neviah. She was a prophetess. Eshet Lapidot, has to mention her husband, wife of Lapidot. He shofta et Yisrael. She judged Israel at that time. Okay. And then it asks, and what was the special character of Deborah that she judged Israel at that time, prophesied about them? And it goes into a whole thing about why she was special, because she managed to do something special. And then the Midrash makes a very radical statement. It says, Me'ed ani, which means I call heaven and earth to testify, right? An ed is a witness. Let heaven and earth be witnesses for me, that whether you are Bein Yisrael, Bein Avodat Kochavim, whether you are a Jew or an idolater, Bein Ish, Bein Isha, whether you are a man or a woman, or Bein Eved or Bein Shivcha, whether you are a male slave or a female slave, Hakol Lefi Ma'aseh, only according to what you do and how you live, Shu Sekach, that you live, will Ruach HaKodesh Baruch Hu Sholav, will the Holy Spirit rest upon you. What an amazing universalistic strand to exist in our tradition, even way back, pre-modern, right? Pre-progressive, right? Straight out of the tradition. I don't care if you're male or female. I don't care if you're Jewish or not Jewish. I don't care if you're free or enslaved. You choose how you act. And if you act morally and well, then the Holy Spirit will rest upon you. You don't need to be Jewish, and anyone can be chosen in that sense. That would explain why we don't have to force conversion as well. So to conclude, and I've left time for questions, Jewish chosenness is not elitist or exclusive. The purpose is for the world, chosen to serve, and all can join, either by converting or just by acting in that moral way, right? We're not special, we're just early adopters who are on the right track. Not always, but if we're faithful, then we can be. And that's quite polemical. I've been quite passionate, haven't I, today? But that's my reading of it. And the reason I say this is because a lot rides on this issue. I'll unshare here. A lot rides on this issue because I don't like Jews being racists. I don't mind if Jews are not religious, if they're not really part of it, but Jews beginning to say these not nice things is uncomfortable, and to use Jewish sources to do it really upsets me. So I've tried to show you how that one reading of it is to do with love. That the reason why we felt chosen is because we felt beloved by God. Even that line, remember that line from Isaiah that Rashi said, everybody else is klum? That's based on a line in Isaiah. And if you look up when he was saying it, the northern kingdom had just been destroyed. Jews are really nervous, and Isaiah had to give them a chizuk. And he said, God still loves you. You're special to God. He doesn't care about anybody else. He really loves you. Don't give up hope. It was an emotional response from Isaiah in a particular context. It's a love story. That's A. B, choosing God, us choosing God. B was this approach that happened in the medieval period, the strand, where Jews were so subjugated that they began to think that people who weren't Jewish weren't as good as them or a bit crazy, and the Jews were a high level. And that made it into the Kuzari, and then the Zohar, and then the Tanya. But I showed you equally that there was another strand of tradition, which was slightly more universalistic, that could always understand that anyone can get close to God in this way if they choose to do it, whether Jewish or not Jewish. And that the purpose of Jews being doing it is to share this knowledge with the rest of the world, right? What my teacher, Rabbi Sachs, calls a Judaism engaged with the world. That's what we need to do. And so that is my thoughts about being chosen and why I like little green people with 3 eyes who believe that they are chosen. Thank you very much. There we go. Now,
thank you, Rabbi Rafi. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm gonna jump right into questions. I will say your camera is flashing, but let's let that be so that we have time for questions. I'm sure people can handle it. So the first one ties the beginning of your talk and the last one. Because on the one hand, you come to this conclusion about chosenness, but coming from the Orthodox denomination, those verses are not changed in your Sidurim. You showed basically the Orthodox version of the Sidurim or the text, which in other denominations, Reform and Reconstructionists are often changed.
Yes.
So your thought about that, holding the text as they are, as an
Orthodox, so interesting because we can change forever. We can change forever. And I don't know what the answer is. I've got a lovely little story, but there's no time now to tell it about that. But I think we have to educate people so they understand how to read words. That's the argument for translating. Let's lane in English. Let's make everything sound like we want it to sound like. Let's give up on anything that's complicated in order that everything's really, really clear. Or let's teach people and understand what they mean so they can understand the use of the words and what their real meaning is. I would argue that it's a misunderstanding based on racist feelings to see yourself as better, right? That's not the text, it's you or your background or your nervousness. So why not just be humble and say, I don't know what it means, let me learn. So a footnote would do the same thing. So changing the text, I don't mind, but it makes it inconsistent. It means that people go over the world and we don't all pray the same, but I don't mind that more. But you know what, put a footnote, right? Chosen means chosen to help others, not to be better. And highlight the point. That's what I'd say. Because the Torah uses the language. And I don't know anyone who's willing to change the words in the Torah, which is interesting to me. Okay, especially if you see, it's weird as a progressive, Shirel, right? If you don't believe the Torah's from heaven, then just change the text in the Torah. Just change the Sefer Torah. But no one does. So I think we all do believe the Torah has some spiritual value and not to be changed as well. So, but anyway.
Thank you. That leads into another question that came up, which is showing the commentaries of the Kuzari and the people in that time and giving them historical context. Isn't your choice just rooted in the historical context of liberalism and equality, and what gives that more weight than those
Brilliant. Right. Always use the idea that a teacher introduces onto them back. Good arguing approach and completely correct. Of course I am. The reason I search for this is because I was uncomfortable with it. Why? Because I've attained some liberal values as well. But I'm aware of my own historical context. So if I only found trends of me saying it, then that's just me being apologetic. But if I can find this trend in the Rambam's son and in Sforno and Rav Hirsch, who, if you know, are mainstream characters, then I'm not alone. There were liberal thinkers before liberalism. Therefore, they couldn't have been apologetic. Does that make sense? Therefore, it's a legitimate strand. Is it the main strand? Is it minor strand? You have to weigh that up for yourself. But I've identified these are authentic strands within our tradition. And they're important in that sense. I hope that's a reasonable answer.
It is. I'm going to make it a little more difficult with another question that I got.
I like difficult.
That according to Jewish tradition, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jews can't opt out of being chosenists, which makes it an inherent trait, maybe leaning more towards the biological or racial.
Excellent point. Another excellent point.
How do you explain that?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. If you don't believe in it, then you can opt out. We believe that when you opt out, you're still Jewish. That's what we believe. But you don't because you opted out. So that's just one point to point out. And the reason why is because we believe that once we are part of this, there is no exit strategy. Now, you could say that as biological, or you could say it's historical. We made a commitment, and therefore we can't go back on it. So I could still read it as historical, not biological in that sense. If that makes sense to people, right? But by the way, the best book on this, if you want the most fundamental one, it's unbelievable. It's called, oh gosh, it's got a tallis on the front. It's going to come to me. It's by Michael Wishgorod, it's called Body of Faith, the Body of Faith, right? Where he literally thinks that God is if you're Jewish, is in your body. Now, you might think that's wild, but he's a Talmud of Rav Soloveitchik. It's written, I don't know if you ever read flamboyant, confident books, which don't gradually explain, but just throw at you in most beautiful language this amazing vision. That's what Wishgorod does. It's so compelling and yet quite fundamentalist in some ways. And the body, it's a God in Israel. I think it's called The Body of Faith. You'll find it, sure. It's an amazing book. Very hard to read, but brilliant. And it talks about that aspect of it, that since history, we're now fixed as God people and there's no way out. That's what happened. So again, people might choose to opt out, but we believe that they can't because the covenant and the history of our people is too compelling to let go. That's my answer, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. We have time for another question. They're streaming in, so I'm choosing as much as I can.
Oh, I love all this. Thank you so much.
Christian theologians pick up on these themes or adopt them as being chosen or reverse it from the, like, how do you see
I don't know, but Wishgerod, who I just mentioned, was interfaith dialogue. That's what he did a lot of. So he was involved in this issue of how he looked at it. But by the way, the Christians, I didn't mention this because of time, the Christians, what did they say? They said they were the new Israel, that God had dropped them and elected us, right? Supersessionism. And then the Muslims come along and say they're the new ones. And if you read Hitler, he comes along and says it's all ridiculous, right? And they're the Aryans are the chosen people. So there's a lot of it about.
Okay.
And therefore, I get much more into it in my chapter, my book, and I've got the time to do that. But there's a lot of complex issues here.
Okay, last question. Why did you choose for yourself the C option and not the A one as like the mutual choice?
Oh, right.
Why
So it's not that I rejected the A one, but I could always see it doesn't solve the danger of racism issue. Because I can say it's all about love. It's not about being better. And I believe that on an emotional level, but it doesn't satisfy my intellectual curiosity or my political understanding. I want an emotional response I can understand, but I also want a kind of more fundamental purpose, existential reason for it. And to see chosenness as in order to help the world is not just about my personal relationship with God, it's about a purpose that God's given me, which makes sense. So that's why. So I didn't reject A. I love A. It's lovable. But I think we as a people need more. And the C one is a real vision. I think even people less religious can get behind. Right? I tell people who aren't religious, I say, I don't want you to be religious, but we have the most amazing body of texts of tradition, whether you think they're from God or some deep-seated human understanding. But we want to share these with the world, which will make all of us better people. And I really relate to that. And that's why C really, really, really speaks to me. And to go right back to the beginning, what was the first thing God says to Abraham? Go from your land, the place that you're from, to the place where I will show you, right? V'hiyeh bracha, and be a blessing. And through you will the world be blessed. It was the vision to Abraham from day one, to share these ideas with the world. There's a wonderful midrash that says, Abraham, why is the first thing God said to Abraham, Lech lecha? It's because Abraham was like a perfume bottle. He was like perfume in a bottle, and the lid was on. And God's like, that's ridiculous. You can't have the lid on, no one can smell it. So take the lid off, or in Hebrew, Lech lecha, get out of the bottle. Go to the major part of the world. Let the Egyptians see you. Let the Assyrians see you. Right? Let them get a good whiff, and then understand what these values could be. It's a wonderful little midrash of that idea. We've got to share these ideas with the world. And hopefully through that, we and them will become better. And things will get better, which we desperately need right now.
Amen. Thank you so much. It's beautiful to end on this note. Thank you, everyone, for your amazing questions. I know I couldn't ask all of them, but
really good.
We really much appreciated. And I look forward to see you next week in the fourth part of this series. And hopefully you'll join our other programs and you can see them all on our website. Thank you very, very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Lovely seeing you, Sharon, as always. I'll see all of you. Be well next week.